talking about being a part of bigger picture, let's transition into talking about ministry leaders. And there was something a few weeks ago that was released. I was fortunate to be able to talk to someone that was pretty close to this a couple of weeks ago, and they shared with me how proud they are of everything that's happening. I want to talk about, let me call it my home. Yes, I'm in the Dominican Republic, but I miss the Gold Coast. I miss living on the Gold Coast. It's one of my favorite places on the planet to live. I've been all over the world, and I would say that the Gold Coast is one of my favorite places to live. And I miss the Gold Coast. Obviously, Dr. Rod, you're still on the Gold Coast, so it's great that I still have that connection there. A number of, one of our other board members is also from the Gold Coast as well, so it's great. But the Gold Coast City Council had the NAYBA report, not spelt neighbour, it's NAYBA report, where they got together and they researched. There's actually quite a bit of research. I'm not going to get into everything about this, and links for everything is below if you want to go and check out the details of it. But I want to kind of capture the headline of it. Gold Coast Christians helped contribute $43 million in social impact to Australia's sixth biggest city last year. So this was a report that they did. They got amongst all the churches and everything like that and looked at all of the contributions the church across the Gold Coast that does to benefits to the community. And what they found is the benefits that the community received was $43 million worth, not just $43 million worth of money, but of the work, of the charity, of the support, of the soup kitchens and food banks and counselling and the benefit to the community. The church on the Gold Coast, which is Australia's sixth biggest cities, so it's not that big, right? $43 million in social impact. First of all, you're talking about the bigger picture. This is now being a part of something bigger. As soon as I heard this, I thought to myself, pastors on the Gold Coast need to stand up. Pastors on the Gold Coast, and obviously, Dr. Rod, you're one of them, and I want to kind of congratulate them. Okay, you don't have the biggest church on the Gold Coast, and sometimes it can be discouraging. And I kind of want to, this is kind of what I want to share to you, Dr. Rod, but also to pastors all over the world. You may not have the biggest ministry, but remember that you're part of something that is bigger than you, that is making an impact, and you are doing your little bit. Your church, your ministry is making that little impact. And so, Dr. Rod, you were a part of $43 million of social impact on the Gold Coast. First of all, thank you. But secondly, how do you feel as a pastor of a church when you see that report?
Well, it makes me, I think, realize perhaps that indeed, the church is bigger than my own little congregation, and it's even bigger than the biggest congregation on the Gold Coast. And we do have some quite large assemblies as well, numbering into the thousands. So churches of all sizes have a contribution to make to our community, to the felt needs of our community. And this report, by the way, wasn't just of Christian churches. It looked at the impact of what we called communities of faith. When I say we, I chair City Impact Limited, which is the kind of official body that commissioned this research. So obviously I've got a bit of an axe to grind here, and it was strongly supported by Gold Coast City Council, and it was supported not just in word. They actually helped fund the whole process as well. So that, in fact, if it wasn't for their very generous support, it may not have happened at all. But the Gold Coast is an interesting place to be in, where a young population, in the sense that the vast bulk of the population was not actually born here.
Yep.
So most people who live in the Gold Coast city area were migrants from other parts of Australia, or indeed from overseas. Around about 7% of our population are New Zealand born, as a matter of fact. So everywhere you go, you bump into a Kiwi, and there are lots of Kiwis who pastor churches over here. But look, I was one of the churches who filled in the survey. I got the survey. What happened was, the survey was done by the NAYBA organisation, and they do this all over the world. Actually, they're a global organisation, and they've got a particular method that they use, which is quite robust. They identified well over 200 faith-based communities and organisations, and then they were all invited to participate by way of a survey. And I do remember filling in the survey, and I was able to outline what it was we were doing in terms of serving our community. And for us, it was mainly actually through financial, I wouldn't call it financial counselling, but maybe financial education, educating people how to wisely manage their finances. And there are lots of churches involved in this through the Christians Against Poverty ministry, and others that operate not only in Australia, but also in many countries overseas. But as you suggested, there are things like soup kitchens and other kinds of cooperatives that operate. There's a lot of counselling that goes on, assistance for people who suffer from disabilities, assistance for people with mental illness, and so on. And so there's a good deal that's happening. And one of the most positive things from this report, from my perspective, was that their response rate was just over 50%.
Yep.
That's a really good response rate to a survey, and it indicates that our faith communities in this area are very strongly engaged. The other thing was, I had no idea of the size of that impact.
Yes.
$43 million is, that would be the bottom, the very lowest amount it could be, because of the assumptions that were made in the calculations.
Yeah, I heard from...
In all likelihood, the values were a lot higher.
I heard, well, I mean, first of all, like you said, only like 50-odd% actually answered. So this is calculated on half of what could actually happen.
But also very, very low estimates of what the wage equivalent at the time, and so on.
And I heard that, someone, I won't mention names, but I heard that an economist actually reviewed the report and said this was way conservative. The numbers were very underestimated, and the impact was actually far greater than that.
Oh, it would be. There are a few assumptions in there which are deliberate assumptions to keep all of the estimates conservative, because you don't want a report like this to be criticised on the basis that, look, you've overinflated all the data. So better to err on the side of being conservative. So yes, the data was based only on the surveys, and one of the major assumptions in there was that the equivalent wages value of the work done by volunteers was actually valued at the minimum legal wage, which is well below the average wage. And so in all likelihood, that $43 million is probably 2 or maybe even 3 times that much. But there's no point in getting into arguments about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The other really interesting result was that over 50% of the population on the Gold Coast availed themselves of one or more of the services provided. And in the compilation of the report, they were very, very careful not to double count.
Yes.
And so these are unique interactions. 57% of the population on the Gold Coast availed themselves of one or other of the services offered by the faith groups. So that's very, very significant. It really does show that governments, for example, can't do it on their own, and individual churches can't do it on their own.
Yeah.
And it really illustrates, I think, the great benefits there are in the Christian churches operating as the Christian church.
Yes.
In order to provide for some of the very pressing needs of our community. Now, of course, evangelization isn't the main reason why this is done.
Yeah.
It's done as an expression of love for our neighbours. But clearly through these actions, people are actually drawn in to the kingdom of God as well. So there's that benefit, or that is not something which is addressed in this particular report.
Yeah.
The other thing that I really liked about the report, and of course I am biased, but the other thing I really liked about the report is that it reported a lot of little case studies of people whose lives were positively impacted. And I think that's important as well, because the $43 million is, in a sense, the value of all of the input.
Mm-hmm.
It's the effect on the lives of the people, which is the output.
Yes.
And of course, that's a much, much more difficult thing to measure.
Yeah.
And the little vignettes we see in this report of people who were impacted, I think that does give us a bit of an inkling as to, if you like, the outputs that were the result of this $43 million worth of inputs. And look, I'd encourage other communities to embark on a similar exercise. It's not all that cheap. You do need to find a fair bit, but one of the reasons why it's not cheap is that it is very, very well done. It's very robust.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. Look, I know many of the pastors involved. I've been privileged to engage with what is now called the Gold Coast Christian Church Leaders Roundtable, and these pastors are just amazing, and their heart is to bless the people. They want to see people in our city flourish, and I think that's a reflection of the heart of God. And it's quite amazing to sit in meetings where pastors are quite clearly overriding their own assembly's interest, their own little church interest, in order to make it possible for the whole of the Church of the Gold Coast to have a social impact, and then beyond that, of course, an impact for the kingdom. Yeah. I feel it a great privilege to live in this city, and I've only lived here for 12 years, coming on to 13 years. But I've seen in that time this growing unity among the leaders of the Christian church, and that includes ministries that are not necessarily directly associated with a named church, and there are plenty of those as well. There's been a great shift, I think, in the heart of many people, and many are coming to the realization that, as we say, we're better together.
Better together. And you're seeing the bigger picture, which is obviously the theme of today. And that's what I want to really encourage. Ministry leaders out there, you're not on your own. You are actually a part of something bigger. Now, you may be part of a denomination, you may be an independent, you may be whatever. Just remember, we are the church. We are all part of this, and we are making. This just goes to show. Now, obviously, like, we're both a little bit biased because we're both from the Gold Coast. You're a pastor on the Gold Coast. You're well in, part of a lot of the efforts of uniting the churches across the Gold Coast. I believe the Gold Coast are doing a great thing for the churches of bringing that unity, obviously being led by the mayor, Tom Tate. He's very intentional about his Christian faith and trying to bring that together, and has done that in a number of different ways. We won't get into that, but it's quite powerful to be able to see what can happen. Now, there's a long way we've got to go. Right, the churches are still not 100% united, but getting there. And you can see when there's this unity, when there's all this working together, there's this impact. at least $43 million worth of impact in a year. And that is just in a small country town. Gold Coast is just a small country town. Last I remember, the count was 600,000 or something like that. I think it's
it's a bit less than that, but it's not big.
It's not a big city, and able to have this impact because all the pastors, all the faith groups are able to see bigger than just building their local church. They're focused on building the community, going out and giving love, giving support, being that, the light unto the world that God has actually called us to. So let me encourage you. If you're a pastor feeling a little bit like you're not achieving, or maybe even just a leader in general that you're not achieving, just remember, you are part of something much, much bigger. And we need to keep our eyes focused on the bigger picture. Yes, the purpose that God has called you to your particular congregation for, but also the community. What is it, the bigger picture of how can you be a better contributor to the community? And remember that you're not alone. There are other churches, other ministries out there in your community, and you guys are making an impact together. So maybe even encouragement. Maybe go join arms, link arms with some of your local other denominations. We're in this together. We are the church. We may worship slightly differently, may have slightly different doctrines, but we serve the one God, and he's called us to the one great commission. So let that be an encouragement. Hey, you've just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube Leadership podcast. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. And if this is challenged, encouraged, or made you think about your leadership in a new way, we'd love to hear about it in the comments below. And hey, if you'd like to watch the full episode, check out the playlist on the screen. And please, it would be an honor if you would consider subscribing to the channel.